Hi, this is Rachael Ancheril. You may remember me as Commander Nhan on Star Trek Discovery. You're listening to Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. This week, we're meeting an actress who has been one of the few people to portray a particular alien species from the Star Trek universe, and her portrayal of this character has led to her becoming quite a fan favorite. Rachael Ancheril plays Lieutenant Nhan on Star Trek Discovery, first seen in Season 2 as a member of Pike's Enterprise crew, and then choosing to stay on board the Discovery ship for Season 3 to join them in the future. Nhan is a Barzan, and if that alien sounds unfamiliar to you, don't worry too much about that. There's only been one other appearance of them in the franchise, and that was way back in the third season of a TNG episode titled The Price. As for Nhan, though, she's appeared in over a dozen episodes between Season 2 and 3 of Discovery, and viewers got to witness an entire character arc happen across those episodes to bring us a true start-to-finish tale that saw Nhan discover who she really was. It was quite an unexpected ride, not just for viewers, but also for the actress. Beyond Star Trek, you may have seen Rachael in shows and films like Team Epic, Rookie Blue, Heroes Are Born, The Art of More, Wynonna Earp, Mary Kills People, and these days, Nurses. Now, a quick disclaimer here, this interview happened well before Star Trek Discovery Season 4 came out, so whether or not she shows up in this season or in the future, we didn't know that at the time, and we certainly couldn't talk about it. So excluding any appearances she may or may not have in Season 4 and beyond, consider this an examination of the entire arc of Nhan as told by the actress herself, along with all of the experiences that Rachael has had that were built into this character and informed who she became on screen. So silence your alert systems and turn your comm badge off. Let's get ready to not just learn about Lieutenant Nhan, but all about Rachael Ancheril. But before we begin this week's episode, if you'd like to support this show, please don't forget to follow Trek Untold on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to get the latest updates and all sorts of other fun Star Trek-related content. You can also check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/TrekUntold, where you can support this show for as little as $2 a month. At higher tiers, you can check out the shows before they come out, know about my guests in advance, and even have a chance to ask them questions, among other benefits coming soon. Shout out to our sponsor, Triple Fiction Productions, who create 3D printed toys and prop replicas inspired by Star Trek. Their items come in all shapes and all sizes and are always amazing, but you're going to hear a little bit more about them later on in the show. If you're listening to us on iTunes or any other audio platform that allows for ratings and reviews, please leave us a 5-star rating and a positive review. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to us at youtube.com/nerdnewstoday and give the video a thumbs up and a comment. Doing any of those things help keep this show growing and allow me to continue bringing you awesome guests and great conversations every single week. Now, without further ado, let's beam in this week's guest. Computer, access interview file. And welcome back to Trek Untold, and now joining us on the other side of the screen, we've got everybody's favorite Barzan. That's Rachael Ancheril. Rachael, how's it going today?
It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming here today. You know, you're one of those characters who kind of really grew on me from the moment you first stepped on screen in Discovery to how your basically story ended. Like, you had such an arc, and that's really one of the best things about talking to you is that you basically got to have a full arc, and whether or not you show up in later seasons doesn't matter because we got a lot to discuss on your 2 seasons with Discovery. First things first, Rachael, I got to ask you the same question I like to start this interview with all my guests, and that's, what's your earliest memory of Star Trek?
Earliest memory of Star Trek, I would have to say, is we used to live in an old farmhouse, and I don't know if it was Saturday or Sunday mornings. My mom would always have Star Trek on, the original series, and we'd be watching it together, getting chores done, but watching it together. So there's that, and I also remember my mom, I've said this before, but she had this pink suitcase that she had since she was a kid, and in it had all the original headshots and autographs of every single character from the original series. This is how diehard of a fan my mom was when she was younger, and she kept those for years and years. I wish I knew what happened to them now, because that would be really fun find, but yeah, those two definitely earliest memories.
Wow, that is amazing. That's some true devotion right there to have a suitcase filled with the autographs. I want to see those.
Yeah, I know. If I ever find it, you and I, it's a date.
So, can you tell us a bit about where you lived as a kid, what your parents did, and what little Rachel wanted to be when she grew up?
Well, I grew up in the country, about an hour outside of Toronto. My mom was a horsey person, so I grew up with a lot of animals from a very young age. And I'm sorry if you can hear that in the background. That is our latest rescue that we brought home, getting curled up beside me and making a ruckus. So I apologize about that.
They're the newest fan of Trek Untold, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. A little fond of Grudge as well. I think he's staring at the screen. So, um, but yeah, so I grew up outside of the city, and I don't, like every kid, I had a bunch of different things I wanted to be when I was younger. It was a astronaut for a little while. I wanted to be the first female Major League Baseball player for a while. I was really into sports. I don't think I ever thought of acting as a job, but yeah, that didn't come until way later. So um, yeah, a lot of things, but nothing that really stuck until high school, I guess.
I had heard another interview that you had thoughts also about being like a police officer as well. Was that something that was happening this time in your life?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I went to an arts high school, and I was denied into the drama program, which is what I wanted to be in, but I was denied into this program like two or three times. But my mom and my grandparents as well were big fans of the school because it was a really, really good school. So they had me audition for everything: dance, which was useless; music, can't play an instrument to save my life; singing, would shatter every glass. But art, I was pretty good with art, and I made it into that arts program. But about halfway through that, for some reason, I decided I wanted to be a police officer. And I think that was just because I grew up in the country. So I was around dogs and horses all the time. So the police officer thing was the love I have for people, but also for animals, and being able to work in a professional environment with animals, and mounted unit specifically, because mounted unit, you are it's good community relations when you're in mounted unit. So you've got to, you're getting out there in communities that don't necessarily have the best relationship maybe with police, or they're worried about police. But you bring the horses in, and you can chat with the kids, and so really that's what I really wanted to do.
That's really kind of interesting because you're talking about working as a police officer as something you are considering, and really what you're saying is it's at least what it sounds like to me is that you were less interested in the enforcement of law part of law enforcement, but more about the community aspect of being that police officer and being that person that people can look up to and kind of follow around to, I guess, be an example of how to live. Does that sound right?
Absolutely. And if I'm going to be totally honest with you, I got, when I was younger, I got in a bit of trouble, especially when my parents were splitting up. So I was a bit of an angry kid, like a, preteen and or early teen. And there was a police officer that I actually dealt with. And after he made me sob like a baby, he had a really good heart-to-heart talk with me, and he basically said, you have a choice in your life. You can go one of two ways at this point in your life. And it was, I mean, it's been many years later, and I still think of him, and I still think of what an impact he made on my life. And so I always thought that with police is that's sort of the idea I wanted to have with kids too, is to be a good inspiration, not really an inspiration, but a good example, a friendly adult in a position of, I guess, authority, but opening up communication, and letting kids know that they're heard, and it doesn't matter, what you're going through in your life. There's always good things that can come, and yeah, that's kind of a long-winded answer, but I hope that made sense.
Yeah, no, it totally did. I mean, it really sounds like you had a sort of roundabout way to get into the performing arts. So I'm kind of curious now, here we are, let's say it's graduation day of high school. What's Rachel's next step? I mean, are you going to university to pursue acting, or what's next for you?
Oh yeah, so no, acting still hadn't come around at this point. So I was hell bent on being a police officer. I did a co-op where I was working in a police station in victim services, which was a very enlightening experience, especially at a really young age. So I went to college I graduated young, so I went to college to do law enforcement. I needed some life experience under my belt. You can go straight from high school and apply for the police force, but if you're really young, it's not recommended, because you need to really grow as a human being yourself before, I think, being put into a position like that. And so I went to college for 2 years, and then I started working in various forms of security. I did uniform, undercover. And then right as I was about to do my police exam, there's a centralized police exam, and a couple of months before I was supposed to do that, which is what I'd been working towards, I was right in the middle of a 7-car collision, and I broke my leg. And so I wasn't able to do my physical. I could have done my written, but I wasn't able to do my physical. And then I got really scared, to be honest with you. When you're young and you have sort of this sense of, I'm going to live forever, and I have my whole life ahead of me. And then after I got injured so badly, and my recovery time, there was a lot of time to think, and I got really aware of my own mortality, let's say. And I didn't know if I would make it through the police force. I didn't know if that was a good choice for me. So I switched gears. And I ended up getting into, I went back to school. I was in a cast, and I took fashion design because my background was in visual arts from high school, and I wanted to be an illustrator. I thought, oh, I'll be an illustrator for designers and maybe magazines. And then I started working in the corporate world, and the 9 to 5 sitting at a desk was just not happening for me. It felt like it was taking my soul away. So I found an agent, and I thought, oh, maybe I can do some commercial print on the side and get something else going to get me out of this corporate world. And I met an agent who said, nope, you are definitely not a model, which I never thought I was. But she said, well, why don't you give a try at acting? And then within the first month with her, I started booking stuff. And then I just I left the corporate world, and I went back to a museum I used to work at when I was a kid, and worked there, and another museum. And I kind of had a whole bunch of I had a job in a bridal shop. I had all these different things kind of cooking while I was trying to pay my dues, doing student films and non-unions, and trying to make a career out of this. I felt like I was a little bit behind, because so many people, in the industry went to really amazing theater schools, and they went to university for acting or film. And so I felt like I was a little behind the ball. So I kind of unorthodox did a different route.
Yeah, you're basically just kind of being thrust in there with, limited formal training, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I had some great acting teachers. I think there's about 4 teachers that I had gone through, but one who I adored, and I stayed with her for a really long time until she moved away to enjoy her retirement. So I can't begrudge her that, but yeah, it was, I definitely, what they say with education is that like a year in the field is worth 2 in school. So I did really learn a lot of stuff very quickly, and it was good. It was a good experience. Yeah.
I also went to school for illustration, by the way, and so
Oh,
I'm the person that would be like in all my meetings at jobs I'm at, where I'm just basically drawing all of my staff
doodling.
people without them knowing. Are you doing that too, by the way? Are you like drawing in your at table readings? Are you like just drawing all the cast members in your script or something?
I would love to, but then I would be the one that's like, oh, it's my line. Oops. And then moving ahead in my pages to do that. But I used to, especially on Trek, actually, I'd be doodling or sketching during downtimes, because we had, because the sets are so huge and setups are very huge. So we'd have a lot of time. So doodling was one of the things for sure. For sure. That's so cool though. I'd love to see your illustrations. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, we'll have to do a trade. I want to see what you're doodling on the Star Trek set. That's definitely something I'm
Yes.
very interested in seeing.
Yes.
So, do you remember what your first paid professional gig was? I don't know if that was a student film or a commercial, but do you remember what it was and what you did for it?
My first paid gig. My first. Ooh, I feel like I have to pull up IMDb and go way back to see first paid. Okay, so I think my first real gig where I had a sort of substantial role, that's the one that sticks out for me. Student films and non-union, you'd maybe get $100 a day, if that, and you'd be driving all over the place. So I don't know that I would call those professional or paid gigs, but my first gig where, yeah, substantial role was in a show called King, which only went for 2 seasons. But I had such an amazing time on that set.
So do you remember anything that you learned from it that you kind of continue to use this day, or something that like left an impact on you for future things that you would be on set for?
Yeah, okay. So, well, I think I learned so much in the like I said before, in the student films and the non-unions and independents. I've learned, because those are smaller sets. So I learned a lot more about how everything comes together and works. But I think when it comes to a professional gig, on King, I absolutely adored the number one, who is Amy Price Francis. I adored the whole cast, actually, and they were really, really good to me. And I was like a deer in headlights. I was so nervous. And Amy was so kind and so open and generous. And she set the example of what a really good number one is on a show. And so she's sort of been the one that I have every set I've been on since. It really, it comes from the top. If you have an amazing group at the top, executive producers, and all the way down through the number one on the cast, and all the way down, like that energy trickles down, and it sort of sets the stage, if you will, of what the experience is like. So really happy and warm sets. You can tell just the energy is better. So it's a lot easier to work, and it's a lot easier to just let go and focus on what you're there for without worrying about other stuff. So yeah, Amy Price Francis is an amazing woman. And I still think about her. And I think it's been like 14 or 15 years. And I still remember her. And also the director on that episode, I attribute him to like giving me my first real shot, because he was so good to me. And then 2 weeks later, he brought me in for just a really quick spot on The Listener. And that was 2 of the 6 credits I needed to get into the union. So right there, he just gave me the shot, and it really, that started opening up doors for me. So yeah.
Now, I know that you played a cop a few times in your career, and I want to talk about one of those particular instances, which I think might have been like a pretty big break for you. And that was your time as Marlo Cruz on Rookie Blue. And I think that's probably like your first recurring character, right?
That was my first series regular gig. Yeah. And I want to talk about nerves. Like, I'm saying I was so nervous on King. Rookie Blue, I remember my first day working, I think they were picking me up at like 5 a.m. And I was in such a panic. And I remember brushing my teeth and looking at myself in the mirror and thinking, how can I get out of this? Because the pressure felt so strong. So yes, Rookie Blue is very memorable to me indeed. Yes.
And you also got to be pregnant for part of that too, which was probably an interesting experience.
I did. Yes, I did. That was a good time. I mean, I think Marlo, it was again, there's another person who opened up doors for me, and that is Tassie Cameron. She was the showrunner of Rookie Blue, and she really believed in me, and they all did. But I would walk through hot coals to work with that lady. She's incredible. And Rookie Blue also, to play a character with a mental illness, which is something that I had never given really a lot of thought to. I thought of mental illness and thought, oh, that's got to be really hard. But once I started researching and understanding, my empathy grew like a million times, because I learned so much about that character, and also the people who were suffering from mental illnesses. The amount of people that reached out to me, and because that character made an impact on them, was priceless. Like, that is just something I could have only hoped for. And so that was a very intense and amazing experience for me. Yeah. And the pregnancy, by the time the pregnancy came around, that show also was my intro to fandoms, and very strong fandoms. I mean, Trek it's a strong fandom for sure. Rookie because I was the other woman, and I also was pregnant. And so I learned about shipping, about what that meant, and I didn't know about that.
I'm so
by
sorry.
the time, yeah, that was that's an experience. I tell you, it's experience. But
Who did they say was your OTP?
oh, their OTP was Sam and Andy, and Marlo was the total, expletive that got in the way, so yeah, when you're the actor that's coming in to interfere with that, it can be tough. Yeah, it can be tough.
What's really cool too, looking through your resume, is there's a lot of shows that you've worked on with folks who we've actually talked to, in fact, on Trek Untold, and a lot of shows that like a lot of the folks who did Discovery have also been on, like Mary Kills People, Killjoys, a bunch of different things here. But in particular, there's actually one show you worked on that has a pretty notable Trek person, at least a notable Trek person now, and that's Jerry O'Connell, who's Lieutenant Ransom, Lower Decks, and you did an episode of a show called Carter with him. So you got any Jerry O'Connell stories for us, Rachel?
Oh, I think he is so funny. I've always thought he was funny. I remember watching him in Sliders. Like I just love that, like his humor. And he's like that in real life. He's also incredibly kind. And I remember we were sitting on set just in between setups, and he comes up to me, he goes, "Oh, you're so funny." And that was like getting an award. Like that was just the fact that Jerry O'Connell, like number one on that show, but also has done comedy for so long. The fact that he said that to me, it just made my day. And I love comedy. I would bend over backwards to do more comedy. So I wish I could work with him more, not in Trek, but in like a comedic show again. But he's very kind, and what you see is what you get. He's just, yeah, he's like a big ball of energy, and so cool and so kind. And actually, after I had done that episode, when I was back on Trek and I had wrapped out for the season, and I remember going on to the Enterprise set, which I'd never been on, and saying hi to Rebecca and being like, "Oh, hey, Rebecca, I'm Rachel. I play Nhan, and you left me on Discovery to stay with Pike, and I also just worked with your husband." And she was so cool. It was just what a cool sort of bridge between the two. It was really, really neat. So yeah.
Trek Untold will return momentarily.
Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. Ranging from prop replicas to use in a fan film or cosplay, to accessories or playsets for figures in all different sizes, Triple Fiction Productions has got you covered. Past pieces for toys have included large centerpieces like 10 Forward from the Enterprise D, shuttlecrafts complete with working lights, and the Voyager Bridge, with smaller pieces including Borg alcoves, the Genesis device, and the dreaded arch-enemy of Worf, barrels. All highly detailed products are 3D printed and hand-painted in the USA, with new items added all the time, while simultaneously improving their printing quality based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit triple-fictionproductions.net or visit them on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Want to get 10% off your next purchase? Use code UNTOLD10 at checkout to receive this discount. Not applicable during sales or clearance events. That's code UNTOLD10 to get 10% off action figure dioramas, accessories, and prop replicas. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
Hey, I'm Licia Nav, aka Ensign Sonia Gomez from Star Trek TNG, and now Captain Sonia Gomez on Lower Decks with her own ship, the Archimedes. Yay! I finally got a promotion after 25 years. So anyway, I'm here to talk about drivebydogooders.org. It's a little charity I run where we go to the outskirts of Skid Row, and from our car windows, we hand out basic human essentials like water, wipes, Coldstream cheese, socks, tarps, masks, t-shirts, things to keep people warm. So we just think that everyone deserves clean water, some protein, and a way to clean themselves, especially during Corona. We also hand out masks to those who really, really need it, who live in tents on the street, mainly the disabled and elderly who have a really hard time getting to services. And we do all of this with no agenda, just pure giving, no overhead. If you'd like to go to the website and donate, it's 100% tax deductible. And if you click on the donate button, you can go right to the $35 option and pick a signed autograph picture of either the Star Trek The Next Generation or Lower Decks, or Total Recall, where I played the three-breasted mutant hooker on Mars, and that's the X-rated version. Put in the comments section your address and anything you'd like me to write, and I'll personally inscribe it and mail it off to you immediately. And again, that's drivebydogooders.org. Captain Sonia Gomez, signing off.
We now return to Trek Untold.
All right, Rachel, well, it's time for Black Alert because we are going on to Discovery right now. And let's just talk about the very beginning of your time in Star Trek. And I'd love to know how you got the role. How was the audition, if you remember it? And did you actually know that you were auditioning for a Star Trek show?
I did. Yeah. It's like Toronto's a small town. You really get to, they have code names, but it always gets around what it is. So I did. I knew what I was auditioning for. I did one here that obviously didn't pan out. And then I was in Calgary doing Winona Earp, and I had to set up a self-tape. Every actor who's had to do a self-tape by themselves in a hotel room knows it's not the most fun, and it's probably not the best tape. So I had like a mountain of furniture in the bathroom doorway holding my phone, and I was shooting against the shower curtain. And that audition didn't go anywhere. And then I was here back in Toronto again, and then the third one came in. This was for Nhan, and it said maybe 1 or 2 episodes. It was very small, and I was like, yeah, great, let's do it. And I auditioned for it. And I remember leaving that audition. I'm sitting in the car and heading home, and there was, like I mentioned, there was code names. And this particular season, the code name included the name of a state in the States, right? And there's this license plate in front of me from this state, which is like in the deep South. And I thought, I wonder if that's a sign that I booked the role. And then boom, a couple days later, Rachel, you booked the role. So that was kind of funny to see that. Just a little sign. I don't know. I might have made that up, but it was unusual to see that license plate in Toronto.
It was fate.
It was fate. Yeah.
Do you recall what those other 2 roles that you auditioned for were?
The first one, no. The second one, yeah. But I don't know if I want to say what it was. Because the person who plays it is so amazing and lovely. And she and I get along really well. And I don't think she even knew that I auditioned for it. But it was along the same vein as Nhan. So that might just in itself give it away what role it was. But I think Nhan, that's who I was meant to be with. So no regrets, no, oh, I wish this happened. No, everything played out as it should.
And I got to ask now, too, knowing that your mom was such a hardcore Trekkie, I mean, when she found out, how excited was she? Was she more excited than you?
Okay, so this is kind of funny, too, because I didn't tell anyone in my family, because with that show, it's very like, you can't, if you tell anyone and it gets out, then you're in trouble. You know what I mean? It was that kind of vibe. You really couldn't say anything. And because my mom was such a fan of Star Trek, I was scared to tell her. She doesn't live here. So it was a bit easier because I'd be like, if I was chatting with her on the phone or whatever, it was fine. But I sent her a link to the first episode after it aired. And I was like, Mom, do you see anyone familiar? And she was like, no. I was like, oh my God, my own mother doesn't recognize me. She had no clue who that was me. She had no idea that Nhan was me. So, and then when she got it, she was. I mean, I think it was cool me being a red shirt too, with her love of the original series. So yeah, she was excited for sure. Yeah.
Now, from the onset of this role, did you know that Nhan was going to be a series regular, coming back for more than 1 episode? Or was it kind of like, here's just your first appearance, that's all you know?
Well, I knew that I was in for a couple of episodes. It's so funny, actually, in the first script, how Nhan was I spent, in the original script that I was supposed to do, I was spending a lot more time with Tilly, which would have been very fun. But it got switched around, as it always does in film and TV. So I I knew I was around for a couple of episodes, and I was working on Killjoys as Warden Renica right after these 3 episodes were up. So I left Trek, and then I went to Killjoys, and then they had called my agent and asked if I was available, and she said no, she's on this other show. And so they said, okay, well, when she's free, we're going to bring her back. And then I didn't really know, I can't remember if I really knew how long I was going to be back for. I think it was just I think it was just like episode to episode. I can't remember if they said, oh, we need you for 5 or 6 or 7. Like, I can't remember what it was, but it was a good deal. And then that took me, so the whole year I was working, which that never happens.
That's always a plus.
It's always a plus, right? And then it sort of was left up in the air of what happened with me. And I went to Mary Kills People after the Christmas break. So I had like 2 weeks off and right into Mary Kills People. And then it was discussions about Trek, me coming back for the following season after that. Yeah.
Do you remember what the first scene was that you actually did on Discovery? I mean, was it actually chronological for you? Was it like the first time you did the show, was it the beam up and then walk through the corridors? Or is there a different scene that you did first?
I remember being on the bridge, the first scenes that I did. And the bridge, and then, yeah, we did the beaming up that day as well, I think. Yeah, so the bridge was my first impression of the Star Trek set. And
oh, wow.
It was impressive. Like, I remember being with, like chatting with Emily and Patrick, because I was on that same side of the bridge with them, and just enthralled with these screens that lit up and all the stuff that was, I mean, that set deck, that you're there. You feel like you're on the bridge. The only thing that gives it away is the green screen. That's it. Like, through the viewer, right? That's it. Everything else is real. All those graphics and everything it's incredible. You don't have to make believe anything. It's amazing. Yeah.
Your first episode in particular is a pretty green screen heavy episode, because there's also a scene that you do with Soneqhua and Anson where you're in those little ships being chased by asteroids, essentially. So there's lots of green screens, lots of visual effects are going to be added in post. So I imagine for you, there's just a lot of, things you have to leave up to your imagination. So had you ever done anything like that before where it was so green screen heavy, and did you feel comfortable performing in a setting like that?
I did, actually. This is one of the things I did back in my non-union days when I was learning. I was in the show that it was like a web series, and it was very so green screen heavy that it was there was no point of reference except for little X's on the floor. So that was my first experience of green screen. So doing Trek was so easy because it really, like I said, the bridge itself is, I mean, I think it's unbelievable actually how much of that is real and not added in. So the green screen moments that I had, I mean, I remember when the 4 of us were walking out to our pods, that was a full green screen. And then being in the pod was in the green screen, but because I was in like a seat, it was a lot, it wasn't as hard. I don't think it's as hard as people think it is. Maybe for me, I don't find green screen very difficult. Not on the Star Trek setting anyway. It was, and even when we went away to we were on was it an asteroid we were on? That was a real environment. That was all real. So, yeah, the green screen aspect, I think for me was very easy. Yeah.
You mean Tig Notaro wasn't a hologram the whole time? She's actually real?
I'm sorry to burst the bubble. She's a real person there.
Oh, wow. Well, damn, I'm embarrassed. All right, so, so we know that Commander Nhan is a Barzan, and that's the second Barzan to appear in Star Trek history. Did you know immediately when you auditioned that you were going to be playing an alien, and were you worried about doing the prosthetics for it?
No. Okay. So all of that was new to me. No, I didn't know. I actually saw Alex was directing the first episode, and he actually, after we did something, I can't remember. Oh, he was showing us footage, or what the storyboard was for a certain scene. And there was an alien that did not look like me at all that was there. And he goes, "Oh, that was supposed to be you." And it was a joke because she was green and totally different. And I think I can't say this for everyone, but I know with me, it was sort of, we're going to screen test some stuff. We're going to see what works with your face and see what doesn't. And I didn't know if I was in prosthetics or not. I went for a contact lens fitting that fit like really big lenses and really small lenses. And I had a body cast done. And if you've never had a body cast done, that is one crazy experience. I thought at one point during that they could kill me and there's nothing I could do. I mean, like, because your whole face and upper body are covered while they're taking a mold of you. And then all the pieces are made on your mold, on your face, right? The mold of your face, which is so amazing. So I didn't know what to expect until the screen test. And then we did the screen test, and then it was trying out the different outfits and the different, how well the makeup, the prosthetics looked on my face, how well the beauty makeup was on my face, my hair, all of that stuff. So the screen test was a big thing.
Now, can you tell us how long the makeup process was every time you showed up and had to get turned into Nhan?
Yeah, it was long. Okay, so I've said this before. I really need to clarify this because I've said, oh, my makeup process was like Doug's. They're very different. The length of time is the same, but Doug is in prosthetics for hours, right? And I was in prosthetics for an hour. Then I would go to either hair or beauty makeup. That was about another hour. And then again, whichever hair or beauty makeup, the third process was another hour, give or take some. So it could be anywhere from 3 to 3.5 hours. They used my hair, and I'm giving away a lot of secrets here about Nhan. They used my hair in the first season I was in, and then they tried to make it easier. So they were using pieces in my hair to try to cut down the time because my process was so long. So they were trying to make it as tight as possible. And I think by the time my last episode I was in, maybe 2.5 hours, 2 3/4 of an hour, maybe. Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty rough amount of time there.
Yeah. You know what? That's okay. The morning is okay. It's when you want to go home at night that, you just want to go home and you've got to go through the process of getting everything removed, and that you can get antsy in the chair. You just want to get out and go home and sleep. So, yeah. Yeah.
On past episodes of Trek Untold, I've had the privilege of speaking to some of your fellow cast members. I've chatted with Ava Blackwell, with Noah Averback-Katz, with David Benjamin Tomlinson just recently also, and a few other disco who have to do
He's
a
my
lot
Linus.
Yes,
I'm
but
sorry.
Linus. He's just Linus, that's right. There's no David, it's just Linus.
No. He's my Linus. My Linus. Trust me. Next time you talk to David, you ask him about Nhan and Linus.
Oh my, okay.
Linus is like, I think, Nhan's little, I don't want to say pet, but there's a real love there between the two of them. At least between us actors, anyway.
Well, I talked to a lot of disco folks who have done characters who have a lot of heavy prosthetics and spend a lot of time in the makeup chair. And they've talked to me about the moment that they found their character, which was like really once they were completely covered in the makeup and saw themselves for the first time. And they really got lost in those characters. Now, for Nhan, I think a lot of your actual face is still there. It's not like, Ava Blackwell, where her entire head is covered up, or Doug Jones, again, where his entire face, his entire body is transformed. With Nhan, you can still see Rachael underneath a little bit of that. So, the fact that your face is still there, what was your process to transform into Nhan? Like, was there a moment that it clicked for you? And was it more difficult because you actually did see your face in it?
I to be honest with you, because of my background with wanting to be a police officer and stuff, I didn't really, this is going to sound bad. It's not that I didn't do stuff to prepare for Nhan, but I relied on myself a lot. Like, if I had been in the academy, how would I have stood? Like, you see, Nhan is always very straight. Everything is very straight with her. It's body language more for me with Nhan, but that's a lot of me as well. The prosthetics for me, the only thing was because as you said, it's only the top third of my face that's hidden. So the only thing for me was knowing how my face moved and if it impacted how things could be coming across. But definitely having the prosthetics in, having my lenses in, having the breathers on, even the uniform itself, the second all of that would come on, it would change. Like, I would be there obviously, but not it would be Nhan. It was just, I think, going through that process every morning of going through those 3 departments and then into wardrobe, and then figuring out with the writers what direction they wanted. Not like it was, I really think it was all the departments involved for me that actually developed Nhan more so than myself finding the character, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you made an interesting choice now that you're explaining it. I think you made an interesting acting choice because a lot of the folks we talked to that were aliens, once they saw that makeup, they really did a complete transformation into what they thought that alien was. Whereas it sounds like with Nhan was more just maybe perhaps the idealized version of a police officer that you wanted to be. Does that sound like it could be accurate?
Yeah, about that. Like, I don't know if she made choices that I would necessarily make, but but that's not me. That's it's the characters, the writers. So, but yeah, I think more of Nhan as a character, as a I think more of that came out once there was more, I think, that came out about Nhan for me. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, I could definitely see that, because I was going to actually ask as a follow-up to that was, having just watched a bunch of the episodes you were in again, watching that very first episode and then seeing the final appearance, it's absolutely night and day for the character. And especially, looking at that first episode, a lot of the dialogue you had was not like the most inspiring kind of dialogue. It was, it almost felt like you were just kind of there to support the other cast members, to be like there to go like, wow, that's cool.
Yep.
And then in the final episode that Nhan is there's a lot more meat to that character. So, as they're adding more things to the script also, I'm just curious, like what kind of did make Nhan come together for you?
It's the script, really. That's what it is. And trying to figure out what the script and the direction, what they were looking for. And then me bringing what I thought that they were looking for and what felt right for Nhan. And then being redirected potentially on the day and being flexible enough to like do what they need me to do. Does that make sense? I
think we've heard that before from other folks where they kind of just say they're in service to the script, and that's what maybe you were feeling.
Yeah. I hope no one thinks there's anything wrong with that. I just think Nhan was one of those, because she was also developed a little bit more too. I mean, the assumption was that Nhan was around just to be with Connolly. That was his name, right? Connolly, yep. Blue shirt, Sean. Connolly and Pike. And that was her role. And Connolly goes. And so to me, when I first read those scripts, I was like, oh, I'm the red shirt that didn't die. So which is why I loved wearing the red shirt so much. I was like, oh, I'm the, because that, shout out to TOS. So that's really how I took it, is just, this is my role to play. And this is just what I'm going to do with this. It's not like with Rookie Blue, where I knew Marlo was bipolar, and that was an angle that I could really go with and really understand and bring up characteristics. I think Nhan being security, eventually chief of security and everything, she's like a statue. Like that's just how she's going to be serious all the time. And she's just going to be very straight faced, and this is work and there's no joking. But then once they brought me back, and then I remember with that script, Pike says, well, Commander Nhan is asked to stay. And then I was like, oh, like when I read that, I was like, oh. And then when I saw the blue uniform, I was like, oh, so Nhan is staying. So then all of a sudden you understand that she's going to have a rapport with the bridge crew, whether you see it or not. She's going to be way more open to them because this is her new family, as opposed to when she was with Pike, her family was Enterprise. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's kind of a big thing with the show. I mean, the show is called literally Discovery, and it's really about all the characters discovering who they are. And I want to definitely get into that a little bit more later on, but I got to ask you something else before we start jumping into these kind of real defining moments for Nhan. And I love hearing about the wardrobe on Discovery, and I've heard all sorts of different stories about it, and you got to wear so many different outfits as Nhan. I mean, let's just first start with that red outfit. You got to do the mini skirt. Tell me about that. Like, was it constraining? Was it comfortable? How was it?
Oh, that was so great. I want my red jacket so bad too. I know it's somewhere in stores.
Those jackets are awesome.
Oh, it was so good. And like to have Gersha is brilliant. Her team is brilliant. They were building stuff on me. It was wild to wear the first of certain uniforms. It was a really, it was a really amazing thing. And I remember walking into a wardrobe for the first time, and seeing an illustration. And remember I mentioned I was, did illustration in school, and especially fashion, and to see me or my conceptualized character wearing all these different outfits on the board, it was so cool. So the red uniform was awesome. I remember in the screen test, that was the outfit I wore in the screen test. And we tried pants, we tried bare legs with the tall boots, we tried a bunch of different things, but I loved the boots that went all the way up under the skirt. I thought that was so cool and very, very utility too, yeah, she's wearing a skirt, but she's still able to be security and, fight and do all of this stuff. So I love that. And again, it's takes me back with my mom watching the show. And so that was a good outfit. Yeah.
A little bit of Trek trivia. You could probably correct me if I'm wrong because you're actually on the set, but I think it's only you and Raven Dowda who have skirts with their uniforms.
Well, we both had the scant, right? We both wore the scant because Nhan's like the Enterprise is a skirt with the jacket, but then when the blue and then Raven with the white, it's the full scant. And then also Oyen wore that true. As well in a Mirror Universe episode. I think I think it's a great look. It's sort of ode to the time, was it early 2000s, the skirt over pants. And I used to love that fashion trend. So I was totally in for that. Yeah.
And like I mentioned, you got to wear a bunch of different outfits. So you already mentioned the blue Discovery uniform. You also got to do the EV suit, and also in that first episode, the what I like to call the Red Power Ranger costume. So of all those things, which was the one you just didn't like the most, if there was one that you didn't like?
My favorite was the EV suit because it was so comfortable.
Really? The EV suit was comfortable?
Yeah, I loved it. And
how was that comfortable? I got to hear that.
It was just because you're in like a onesie, you're in like a jumpsuit. It is, and I'm a onesie person. I love onesies. So just to be in that jumpsuit, and the boots were super comfortable. And the vest reminded me of bulletproof vests, right? So it just felt right. And it felt good on Nhan. Like it felt great for Nhan. The Power Ranger suit, I loved the actual suit itself. Again, very comfortable. You sweat like crazy. So I felt disgusting. I would always be apologizing because they have to help you get out of it. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm sorry it's hot. I'm sorry it's moist. This is so disgusting. I'm so sorry. Everyone's probably like, ew. But the pieces, the space, like the pieces on top were kind of uncomfortable. So you'd get sore, right? You'd really get sore because there's it pushed down on your shoulders. But those were the most comfortable boots, actually. Those ones with the Power Ranger suit, those were like space boots, and they were so comfy. But I didn't like the stuff that went around my chest as much as I loved the EV suit.
Huh, yeah, that's a surprising answer. I thought the EV suit would be like the most painful thing to possibly put on, because that thing is a really cool looking outfit, but it looks like it's bulky.
You're talking about the blue one, right? The blue EV suit? Yeah, that was my favorite. Seriously, it was my favorite. Yeah.
I mean, it definitely looks the coolest. No argument there.
I think so too.
Now, someone who I love to hear stories about on this podcast is Doug Jones. Did you ever get to have any advice or any awesome interactions that you can share with us today?
Doug, he just lights up everyone's life. He just lights up. I mean, there's so many people that do that on that set, but Doug is like, with his singing and his stories and his he is so fun. He does this there was like faux fashion shows and sing-alongs and cabaret, and it was like, those are really, really long days. So the fact that you had so many people that were so filled with energy and just laughter, it makes the days so fun. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he would always be the one, I don't know, I would see him every day in the in the prosthetics trailer, right? And so to have those mornings are so fun. You have music blasting and everyone's singing, and it's a real joy. And I'm very grateful to him because he was really good to me.
So is like Anthony Rapp and Doug Jones doing some and Wilson Cruz doing some Rent songs together? Is that what's going on every morning?
Well, there was definitely some of that. Anthony, I didn't get to see that often. I really, my first impression of Anthony, I remember he came up to me we were walking by each other at the trailers, and he goes, well, hello, when I was new, like one of my first days. And he goes, what are you? And I was like, a Barzan? I didn't even know what that was at that time. I remember searching. I was like, what's Barzan? And so Anthony, unfortunately, I didn't get to see that often, but I love seeing him. Wilson, of course, I got to see. But yeah, and Soneqhua, like they're just all of them, and Mary and Emily and Sarah, like, I mean, Patrick, Ron, like everyone. Everyone is just such a delight to be around. So I feel very lucky. Yeah.
Everybody who I talked to from Discovery has all said the same thing to me, and that's the Discovery set is the best set they've ever worked on. Is that true for you too?
Of course, you know what? Here's the thing. It's definitely up there. I have been so lucky in my career to work on such amazing productions. I would say in 15 years, 95, 98% have been, I didn't want to leave. They were so fun. And Discovery is definitely one of those. Yeah. I have to give kudos to all the shows because they were all really good to me, so I can't play favorites here. I'd love to, but
for the sake of the podcast, we'll just lie and say, obviously Discovery is your favorite.
Obviously Discovery is my favorite. Obviously.
So there's 2 episodes that I think are really defining moments for the character of Nhan. And the first one is the episode Project Daedalus, where you get to have some intense action scenes with Soneqhua and Hannah Cheeseman as Arium. It's a very important episode also to show Nhan as a part of the crew and really coming into her own as a character. And we really get to see her confidence build up here as well. So I'd love to hear some stories about this episode because there's a lot of stunt work here. Again, you're in those really awesome EV suits. What memories stand out for you from doing that episode?
They're probably not even, I mean, they're related to the episodes. It has nothing to do with me in the episode, but my favorite moments actually of that episode were watching the stunt rehearsals. I remember sitting, and Sonequa's husband and son were watching one day when she was working with Hannah, and I was in as well. And I was taking pictures of them because I love being behind the camera. I was taking pictures of them, and just even video, and watching them with the stunt performers. And there's 2 sets of Arium's and Michael Burnham's working side by side. It was amazing. It was just so fun to watch, and those girls are spectacular human beings. And that was Hannah's episode. You know what I mean? That was her episode. And I think character wise with Nhan, I think she feels like, for the first long time, actually, the first season I was in, I think it took up to that for Nhan to not be the outsider or seen as the outsider. I mean, it's sprinkled throughout the season where Nhan gives an input and everyone's sort of like, who are you? And she's like, oh, Nhan, so that was out of everyone that could have opened that airlock, Nhan, I think, was the best choice, because not only is it her job, but she also wasn't as at that point, she's not as attached to the crew as Arium is, obviously, right?
Yeah,
so,
I felt like she had to make the tough choice, which she didn't seem to want to have to make, but she had to do it as part of her duty.
That's right. Yeah.
And we should mention, too, that this episode is directed by Jonathan Frakes, and I love hearing Frakes stories, too. Take Frakes. What was it like being directed by Jonathan Frakes?
You can always tell when you're working with an actor's director or a director that's been an actor. You can always tell because he's just so immersed in that. I mean, we're on the bridge and there's like explosions going off, but we're not hearing explosions, right? But we are, because then Jonathan Frakes would be like, and then this comes in, boom, and and he would just give you the effect, and he's got a booming voice, so he was great. He was, and he'd pop into the makeup trailer and chat with them. You could tell there was times where he'd be like, I want to be on the other side of the camera, but he was great. He was great.
Now, let's talk about Nhan's final appearance, at least as of now in Season 3, the final appearance of Nhan, which is Die Trying. And I'd like to know, when did you find out that this would be the end, at least for now, the end of Nhan's character?
Oh, this question. I knew early. I knew, like I was, like I said before, I was finishing up Mary Kills People, and then we started talking about the contract and the show and all of that stuff. And I feel, I knew early. and they knew early, and it was sort of, it's hard to explain because there's so many aspects to Nhan's journey in season 3. There's so many aspects as to why, and I can't just explain it in one simple thing, but I have to leave it at this, that the powers that be have been so good to me from beginning to end, and they have, the fact that they gave me a send-off like that and left it open, the fact I have such a good rapport with everyone. I mean, I just feel very grateful for the time that I've had with them and time that I could have with them. I think the way they left it for me is very kind, to have it open, you know? So yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching it the first time and seeing the opening teaser for the previously on Discovery thing that rolls by, and I noticed they were showing so much more of Nhan than they usually did, and I'm like, oh no, something's gonna happen to Nhan. And sadly, it was the end, unfortunately. But yeah, like I said, it was open-ended, which is great. And it's an episode that really does tug on your heartstrings, I think, and like really shows Nhan going through a lot, processing her emotions, and ultimately choosing to start this new family on the Tikov. So I'm curious, on a personal level, what did Rachael bring into this episode to make it more real for her?
Oh, I think I tell you, all those tears are real. I think the director, she had to like rein me in a few times. I think because I got very emotional, and even in the read-through, I've said this before, even in the read-through, I was sobbing. I felt ridiculous because I was not being professional, but it was very difficult for me to, even at the read-through, and I'd read the script several times before the read-through, and it was still very tough to get through that script. I honestly was expecting action. I was not expecting Nhan's episode, her send-off, to be emotional like that. So that was a lot of Rachael leaving, and choices I made, and and so saying goodbye to Soneqhua as well. And that was my last scene, one of my last scenes, like the very final scene I did of that episode shooting was standing at the window and looking at Discovery leaving.
Oh wow.
But Soneqhua, my goodbye, that was my real like last scene. And it was they joke, oh, people have like peppermint sticks and stuff to put under your eyes to make you cry. No, none of that was needed. I sobbed. And when I gave her hugs, it was like, I don't know if that was Nhan or Rachael or a blend of the two, but it was like, hugs from both of us to Soneqhua / Burnham. Yeah.
And I think the thing that I find maybe endearing about the character of Nhan is that, having talked to you today now, especially learning more about how the character comes together, is that Nhan really feels like an extension of Rachael. So, I mean, it really feels like you're just in general blurring the lines of the two characters, so rather the duality of the character and Rachael. I mean, so I could totally understand why you had maybe some problems separating the two, and it really made for some great TV, but I'm sure horrible crying on the actual set.
No, hey, whatever works, you got to get the shot done, whatever works, you just use it. But I don't often do that, blend the two. I usually keep things very, very separate. But I think the way that Nhan came about in my life, we grew together. We sort of developed together. Do you know what I mean? That hasn't really happened for, usually with other shows I've been on, the parameters are set and I know what to expect. I know what it's for this amount of time, and it's this, and this is all the details I have about the character. But with Nhan, we were learning. I was learning about her, I think, as much as maybe everybody else was along the way. So I think it was easier to blend the two together, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, Rachael, this is kind of an oddity here, but like one of the moments I really enjoyed with you in Discovery was you had some time with Michelle Yeoh in one of the episodes, and it got me almost like feeling like, oh, is she going to go to Section 31? Like, what's going to happen to Nhan? Like, I got really excited for that possibility. But, besides the story plot stuff that's happening here, I would love to know what it's like working with Michelle Yeoh, because I just love her and everything she's in.
I was so intimidated. I don't get intimidated like super easily, but I was so intimidated. I mean, you have Georgiou, and then you have Michelle Yeoh, and then you have two of them together, and it's like, whoa, it's very, she is such an amazing human, and she's so kind and generous, and she's lovely. But it's Michelle Yeoh, like, it's like, oh my gosh, it was amazing. And to actually get to play with her and to have fun scenes. even with lines like AI sausage and yum yum, it was still, we had such a good time together. I did anyway. So she's an amazing lady. Yeah, amazing.
And I know you can't actually give anything away about what goes on behind the scenes, but I felt like the fact that from a character perspective, Georgiou is suddenly taking an interest in Nhan, and I'm like, is she trying to bring her into Section 31? Was this perhaps an area you wanted to have Nhan go into as well? Or did you feel that Nhan was content just being part of Starfleet on the Discovery Bridge?
I think Nhan goes where she's told. I think she's just very obedient that way. She follows orders. But I don't know. You know what I'd really love, to be honest with you? I mean, I'd love to go to Section 31. I would also love if they did a flashback of Enterprise before Spock came on. If they ever did something with Pike, I'd love for Nhan to be there on Enterprise. If it was ever a flashback, because obviously she can't go there because she's in the future. But either of those, that would be so fun, so fun. I would even pop up and surprise Lieutenant Ransom. You know what I mean? Like, come on, let's just cross the bridges a little bit. No pun intended. You know?
Why not?
Exactly.
I mean, I'm curious, to know that if you did come back to Trek at some point, would you want to revive Nhan, or do you want to be someone else? Do you want to just be a human without having all the prosthetics on, or do you want to continue being aliens? What would be your goal if you did get a second shot at returning to the franchise?
I think they have enough humans. You know what I mean? I think when do you ever get to play an alien? I'd play human in all my other characters. I think playing an alien is great. My preference definitely would be with Nhan, of course, but I would never say no to other potentials. I'm always open for a discussion, but Nhan is definitely my preference. And I didn't think people would love her as much as they do. I can't believe how much love that character gets. And so, come on, I gotta revive Nhan,
I mean, Nhan absolutely grew on me. It was really sad to see her story end, but hopefully, hey, there's still a possibility you guys can run into each other again in the future, right? So we'll see what happens there.
That's right. Yep. She's just doing a mission. She's just taking some vacation time with her family. That's all.
Get some PTO. That's all.
Exactly.
So looking back on your 2 seasons on Discovery, is there anything that you wish you could have done differently on the show?
No, actually. There's tons of stuff I would do differently on other shows I've been or choices I've made, but no, with Nhan, nope. I think she's great with what happened with her. I wouldn't change anything, to be honest with you, at all. Not one thing. Do you think I should be changing something?
I don't think so at all.
Okay, great, good, okay.
Nhan is perfect. I ship Nhan.
Hey, I love it. I love it. Thank you.
All right, so big picture question now for you, Rachael. What's something that you know today that you wish you knew years ago, maybe when you were first coming up in this industry?
That everything was going to be okay, that I was going to be a working actor, and that I was going to make a living off of working as an actor. There were so many times throughout where I was like, what am I doing with my life? And every time I would get like that and just think I hit rock bottom, I would book something. So I wish I could go back and tell myself when I was really panicking, everything's going to be fine. And you won't believe the stuff you're going to be doing in, however many years. And you'll be on Star Trek and you'll be on all these different shows. I wish I could have told myself that. I think I would have saved myself a lot of stress.
What's a piece of advice that someone gave you, whether it was about life or acting, that you still think about and still use every day? This is one of my earliest memories in kindergarten, is there used to always be a word of the day. And I remember there was this word, perseverance, and it was such a big word. And I remember going home and asking my mom, what does perseverance mean? And she goes, you keep trying, you keep trying. And so I have never forgotten that, perseverance. And I think in this business, that's what you always have to keep your eye on. It's perseverance. So that's Great
what
answer.
I got for you.
Great answer. So as we know, currently, season 4 of Star Trek Discovery, we're not going to necessarily be seeing Nhan. We don't know. She could pop up, but we don't know as of now. But these days you're working. But these days I know that you're working on a show called Nurses. So do you want to tell us about Nurses and what else you're doing right now?
I was actually. I finished, that was my pandemic project, actually. We were shooting in 2020. We started in February, and I think we went till the end of March when everything got shut down. And we were the first production in Toronto, if not Canada, to return. We were back in July, and we were the first production also to finish without anybody getting sick, any incidents at all. So that was something to be really proud of. And it was such a great, I mean, it's a medical show, so it's quite the set to be on during a pandemic. You know, you're in a hospital setting. But it was so fun. It was so nice to be back there. I like to be back with a bunch of people I'd worked with before, because some of the executive producers, I knew them from Rookie Blue days or Mary Kills People. So when I go back to a Canadian set, I also feel like I'm going home. It's crazy because you get to know all the crew, right, through all the different productions you worked on, and so it's such a good time with them. And the cast was amazing, and it was a great ride. It was really, really fun. I just finished a guest spot on something else, and it's the way of the actor. You're always just plugging forward for the next job. But I've also recently, earlier this year, I started working with a writer, and he and I, we turned one of his books into a script, and then we took a pitch that I had done 7 years ago when I was in Newfoundland. I fell in love with Newfoundland, and I wrote this pitch idea. And like I said, I met him earlier this year, and after we were finished with his script, I threw him this pitch, and he loved it. And he was like, let's turn this into a script. And so we've turned that into a script. And I was just out in Newfoundland like a couple of weeks ago. And it was amazing to know that our script was finished. And there's this project I started 7 years ago, and it was like full circle, being back in Newfoundland. And so we've just sent that pitch Bible off. And so here's hoping. It would be great to sell some stuff. But eventually, what I'd really love to do is be directing as well. So with doing these pitches and the writing and stuff, it's really what these are for me are stepping stones towards directing, and just working with great crews and great people.
Yeah. When you mentioned directing, I'm not surprised by that because, as we talked about way earlier in this interview, illustration was something you wanted to do. And I feel like if you're an illustrator, you're a storyteller. And you're a visual storyteller. So I could definitely see a clear attraction there. And so, of course, to bring this back to Star Trek because we have to.
Yes.
Were you on set kind of like, eyeballing the directors, seeing what they do, trying to pick things up from them?
100%. That was the worst part about quarantine, like about COVID times on nurses, is I couldn't do that. But on Trek, absolutely. And there's this photo of Maya and I love this photo because it was like an on-set photo that the on-set photographer captured, and she and I are both staring at one of the cameras. And really what she's doing is she's explaining to me, I don't know if we were talking about lenses at that point, but the camera guys were awesome. They would share with me, even the lighting. I would ask questions, and I wouldn't impose on that. It's if we have time and I'm not interrupting them while they're trying to work, but everyone was always very free with giving me information. And I was constantly observing, and where the cast would always sit, we were right near Video Village. So it was easy to sort of just hang out and kind of keep an eye and watch what, and some of the directors would show me the takes, and I'd sit back, and Victor, he would always do playback for me. Like he would show me, and it was just really neat to see it from that perspective and to understand how, because they would talk about cutting it together. So I was learning a lot while being paid to be an actor. I also had a bit of an education as well. And it was really, really good. Yeah.
Well, as excited as I am for a possible return of Nhan some point down the future in Discovery, I now kind of want to see Rachael in the director's chair for an episode of any Star Trek show. So maybe that's what can happen a few years from now.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to really, really build up a resume to do that. Yeah.
Work on that technobabble too.
Exactly. Thank God I didn't have very much technobabble to say myself. Thank the Lord. Although I'll tell you, I still remember the Italian I had to speak when the universal translator was not functioning. Yes. So that's how much, that's a certain lines when you have to drive them into your head. Sometimes they never leave.
Can I put you on the spot and ask you what that line was?
Yeah. Il trattore universale non funziona. I don't know if I did that right, but it was pretty close.
Sounds good for me. I'll take it.
Yeah. Okay, good. Take it. Yeah, good.
So, Rachael, last thing for today.
Sure.
What is the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
Oh, the people, 100% the people. I have never, like I said to you, I've experienced fandoms before, but this fandom is unlike anything, I think anything out there. I have never received such kind messages. I've met so many great people through Trek, like just through sending me messages, and we still talk. And it's been a couple years later. It that's really special to be connecting with people that I never would have met, possibly. I mean, maybe we would have, but from all parts of the world. That's pretty spectacular. I think that is definitely the highlight for me, for sure. And as you know, I love people, so there we go.
Well, Rachael, thank you so much for chatting with us today and telling us not just all these great Star Trek stories, but just everything else about who you are. And I think, a lot of those decisions have clearly informed your acting and performing choices in the best way possible. And, if you do get a chance to be in that director's seat someday, I think all these different tools that you have in your toolbox are going to really shine and just make you a very well-rounded director. So, I look forward to hopefully seeing you again in the Star Trek universe. But if not,
Yes.
I wish you the best for everything out there beyond in the infinity.
You're wonderful. Thank you very much. There's lots of compliments in there for me, and I appreciate them. Thank you very, very much. And thank you for having me as well. Yeah.
That's it for this week's episode of Trek Untold. Until next time, please don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you're in a position to financially support the show, please consider becoming a supporter over on patreon.com/trekuntold, or pick up some merchandise from our Redbubble store. If you're looking for direct links for any of these things, links will be right in the show notes. Special thanks to Cool Waters Productions for providing us with this week's guest. Check out inhouse-con.com for info on upcoming events with all of their Star Trek clients and other celebs they work with. And head over to coolwatersprod.com to pick up autographs and more from all of them. If you have any questions or comments for the show, or would like to suggest a guest or discuss any sponsorship ideas with us, send me a message at trekuntold@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to Trek Untold and for continuing to support this show. I hope you'll come back next time to learn more stories about Star Trek and beyond. Until then, I'm Matthew Kaplowitz, and always remember, fortune favors the bold.
Trek Untold is sponsored by TrekSphere.com, promoting fan-produced Star Trek content in all forms, is powered by the RageWorks podcasting network, and is affiliated with Nerd News Today.